Yeah, it looks like we're live. Everybody, we are 3 minutes late for the broadcast, but we are here on the Parapost Network. This is our first attempt at a live show. And as you can see, we went kind of big with it. We have a couple of awesome guests, and I'm going to introduce to you right after the intro.
The truth is out there. Never stop looking. Never be sheep. Always disrupt. We are the ungovernable. We are the truth seekers. We are Sasquatchers.
And we are live. This is our third show.
Whoops.
So we lost Linda already. This is our third show.
Off to a good start.
I can verify she was here. I'm a witness.
Well, hopefully she's able to come back. She did say that she was having issues with her phone.
Yeah, it's totally messed up. Drew's intro too, by the way.
It's my second intro this week. That's gonna be a little messy, but we're live, so we'll just take it from the top here. I had a little thing, so I'll just kind of revert back to it. This is our third show this week. Our regular pre-records went up. We are without obligation to be here, but desire. We have with us tonight Steve Ward of the High Strangeness Factor and a really cool guest in Linda Sigman. I hope I said the last name correctly, who actually experienced the Mothman. So, this is super fitting and an awesome last-minute addition to the show here. But as you can see, my co-host tonight is actually the Mothman himself as well.
What up?
How's everybody doing?
You call me M.
I like your eyes.
Well, I think Linda and I have a lot of questions for the Mothman because
Yeah,
a lot of things have not been answered.
I have to speak to my lawyer first.
Would that be Sasquatch?
He's very hard to get a hold of.
Yes.
So thank you guys for coming on. I honestly, I'm kind of floored by the reception, and I'm really excited to talk to both of you. I guess I don't quite know where to start. So, Steve, if you don't mind, can we maybe start with Linda and hear her accounts of the sighting that she had experienced?
I knew she was going to upstage me, but yes, that would be great.
Meow. Oh.
Yeah, she does. She's got a great story to tell.
Well, I can't wait to hear it.
Do you want the long version, the short version, or the in between?
Whatever works best for you. I don't mind long versions if you don't mind telling long versions, but everything is entirely up to you. The floor is all yours.
If it gets too long, I'm just going to go out and get a pizza.
Okay, I know where you live.
Yeah, she does.
Okay, my name is Linda Sigman, and when I was 16 years old, I lived in Pomeroy, Ohio, with my parents along the Ohio River, and I suppose it's about 20 miles northwest of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the Mothman was first sighted. And in 1966, when the Mothman was sighted in November, all of us kids would get in cars and go down to what we call the TNT area in Point Pleasant, which they made ammunition during World War II and stored it in bunkers down there. I can remember the building that was down there and different things, but it's gone. But anyway, in April of 1967, I was dating a boy from Mason, West Virginia, and we would go out and hunt for the Mothman, but this time we went in a different direction. There was a lady that was on her way to church a couple of weeks prior to that, and she saw him in the middle of the road, which was, as the crow flies, probably about 3 miles from where my boyfriend and I went for a drive that evening. So he picked me up about 7:15, and we took off across the Pomeroy Mason Bridge. My house was just, I suppose maybe 20 yards from the bridge. I lived along the river. And we went to Mason, West Virginia, and went back through the back roads, and it wasn't quite dark yet, so he had a place he wanted to show me, which you could see the stars, and it was just a nice, quiet time, and we were getting to know each other. So we went up this road. It was called Carson Road, and it was about 7:30 when we got over there, I would say, and we drove through the country, maybe about 2 miles from Mason, and got up and topped the hill and pulled in and turned around in this field and stopped the car. And he had a quilt in the back seat, so we took the quilt and put it on the front of the hood of the car, and we got out and sat on the hood of the car to talk. And it was in April, so there weren't any leaves on the trees. So as we look to our right, there is a field with a line of trees, and to our front was we could see across the road that we drove in on, and down over the hill there was the Ohio River. So we were sitting there talking for a little bit. We were probably about 50 yards, maybe 30 yards back from the road we came in on, but turned around to go out if we had to. And I noticed he was looking over his shoulder to the right, and I asked him what he was looking at. And he said, "That star over there looks kind of weird. Do you see it?" And I said, "That one over there?" And he said, "Yeah, I've been watching it for about 10 minutes. And I said, "Well, it does look strange." And it would get big, and then it would get small, and then it would get bigger, and then smaller. And suddenly, behind the trees, it burst through the clouds, and it was like an explosion, like a supernova. I was thinking back in that time, World War III, we grew up in the 50s, and yeah, it was like a super moon. And I thought it was farther away than what it was, but it wasn't. It was actually just right on the other side of the tree line that we were looking to our right through. And, we just sat there in shock, and suddenly it started to move. So it was behind the tree line, and we were looking over to our left. We were still sitting on the hood of the car, and it traveled, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 miles an hour. It wasn't going very fast, and it didn't make any sound at all, just a big red ball. So it got to the end of the tree line up to our right, stopped at the road that we had come in on. Then we noticed how large it was. I mean, the thing was gigantic, and it just sat there, and we're like, oh my God, here we are up here, and we're actually going to see something. We didn't really think maybe Mothman, but, we heard that John Keel, when he was down there, we didn't really know what his name was, but we knew there was an author down there, and Mary Heyer, she wrote for the newspaper, and we knew that they had been seeing things in the sky. And of course, all of us teenagers for 6 months had been down around looking, and we didn't actually think we were going to see something, but we did. The next thing I know, the thing is right over top of us, no more than 20 feet, treetop high, and it was. Then we were in the car, and I didn't remember getting in the car. I couldn't remember how I got in the car, and I looked out the window. He had a 56 Chevy, and I was leaning, looking out, and looked up, and you could not see the sky. The the sky was darkened by this object, and it just made like a sucking noise. I said it always sounded like a vacuum cleaner. That, and I was thinking, oh man, we're dead. We're going to get sucked up. And he's just looking at it, and I'm like, what is that? And was looking out like this. And he said, we're getting out of here. And of course, he tried to start the car, and typical, he couldn't get it going. Finally, he did. And as we started to pull out, the object itself started to move too. And this creature was on the ground to the left of the object. And it went in front of the car and flew as fast as it could fly with its arms back. And I said, look, do you see that? Did you see that creature? He actually didn't see it, or he didn't want to own up to it. He said, I'm busy getting us out of here. And he pulled up to the road we came in on, and we fishtailed as fast as we could down to the left. Well, I'm hanging out the car, and I see the creature, and it flies to my right up into the tree line where that object came out from behind. And it lands there. And with all the light from the UFO and from our headlights and everything, I could just see it land up there and turn around. Now, I did not see the eyes. I wish I had. I wish I had them, but I didn't see the eyes. And we were fishtailing going down this country road, gravel road, and we get down, I suppose maybe quarter of a mile, not a whole lot more. And we stopped at an area that used to be an old strip mine. And we're sitting there, and he pulls in, and we turn back around, and we stop to talk about what we had seen. And I said, did you not see that creature? He said, oh, Linda, I was trying to get us out of there. And I'm like, well, let's go back up there. I want to see it. 16 years old. I'm not scared of anything. He's like, you're crazy. Let's just sit here for a little bit. And all of a sudden, these lights come up over the hill from where we had come in down the road, where we were fishtailing down the road. And I said, I think is the moon supposed to be coming up? And he said, no. And I said, well, there comes some headlights. Maybe we should get out of here. But it wasn't a car. It was another UFO. Oh my gosh. That thing it's coming after us. It knows where we are.
Do you think it was the same thing, or was it a different color?
It was smaller. This one was about the size of a Volkswagen. The other one was about the size of an airplane. It was huge. Wow. The other one was gigantic. And this one was about the size of a small car. And then I said, oh, look, do you think that's that creature in another form? And of course, he didn't have much to say. He was just sitting there, and it was following the road. And it was about 3 feet above the road. And we're just watching it. And I said, well, the lights were out. So let's just be real quiet. Maybe it won't find us. And we had our windows down. It didn't make any noise either. And suddenly it came parallel with us, and it stopped. I'm like, oh God, we're dead. Well, then it starts moving toward us. And it was moving slow like that other one, but this one was smaller, and this one was different. And it looked like a bluish white light, kind of like a fluorescent light. And it goes right up to the hood of the car, and it stops. It's like, my God. And we're sitting there looking at it, and I'm trying to decide if it is alive, or if there's something in it, or if it's some kind of a vehicle. And honestly, I thought it was maybe, I know this sounds odd, like maybe it was alive. It was an entity in its own self. And I'm thinking that's that creature we saw, just maybe in another form. And we sat there for a little bit, and all of a sudden, it must have been 5 or 10 minutes. We just stared at it. And I wanted to get out. And he's like, under your, it's just stay in the car. And it goes up over the car and it fills the car with bluish white light. And I'm on the floor, on the floorboard at this time, thinking, it's going to get us this time. So I'm like, well, let's get out. And we got out of the car and we walked all the way around and couldn't see anything. And the direction it flew, when it flew up over top of us, was towards the river, towards the Pomeroy Mason Bridge that we came across from Pomeroy to Mason on to go back in the country. And it flew that direction. I'm like, that's odd. So we go across the bridge to go home. And he's like, are you okay? It's like, I feel funny. He goes, how do you feel? And I said, I feel like my brain has been picked. And it was before computers, but it felt like something had been uploaded in my mind. I felt different. I'd always been a psychic child. I came from a long lineage of psychic people. And my mother was extremely psychic. We get across the bridge, and I said, let's go to Pomeroy. Let's turn right instead of left. If you turn left, you go right down to my home. So we turned right. And if you're familiar with the area, Pomeroy is one of the longest straight expanses along the Ohio River that has a city front right along the river. And I think it's 2 miles, 3 miles maybe. So we go up and we sit on the parking lot and overlook the river. And we look across the river and we see these lights going back and forth. And I'm like, do you think that's one of those things? It's like, I don't know. He said, I'm just going to take you home. Looked at my watch and it's 8:30. I'm like, we weren't over there that long. What happened all that time? It's like, I don't know. That was before I knew anything about lost time or anything like that. So we get down home. It's dark and my house faces the river. And right across the river is Wahama High School. Well, we were back behind and back into the hills behind Wahama High School where we were parked when we saw our object. We get in the driveway. My dad's running out to the car, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm in trouble now. And how did he know where I was or what's going on? And he said, get out of the car. Your mom and I just saw a UFO come up over Wahama High School and go towards Pomeroy, and it just barely made it over top the bridge. So my mom was on the porch, and I saw her go inside. And back then, we just had landlines for our phone, and she came running out. She said, your grandmother's on the phone. She said, go look, there's UFOs coming down towards your house. So there was at least 3, maybe 4. It was in the paper and different things. Well, to make a long story short, I moved out here in 2017. I got a computer. Hang on a second.
I hope there's an earthquake going on over there.
Mothman would like to say that he also has a
It
computer.
could just be some renovation.
I didn't mean to push him up. He's getting loud. Oh, shoot. Anyway, I went down, back up just a little bit. I went down to Point Pleasant a week and a half before the bridge fell. And when I went across the Silver Bridge, it swung as usual. Oh, back and forth. And I stopped right in the middle of it. We used to go down and just sit on it to get it to swing. So we thought it was fun. Isn't that terrible? And we thought it would swing like this, and it's like, oh my God. And then it would go like this, maybe. We hoped it would. We just didn't think about it. But I went down there to get a present for my sister at Christmas. And I don't know whether you want to know all this or not, but I pulled into the dress shop where I was going to go in. It was about 7:30. It was getting dark. It was just a little before Christmas. And there was one of the men in black standing out in front, just real stoic. And I went in. When I came back out, there was another one on the other side. I went home and I told my parents, and my dad said, you stay away from down there. Those guys, government men, is what they called them. Government men.
I remember you said that they're actually wearing sunglasses at night.
They had sunglasses on and black hats and black suits and just standing there.
Tell us about the pallor of their skin.
I didn't want to walk past there and go in the store because he was leaning right against the edge of where you go in by the window. And when I walked past him, I thought, I'm just going to go real fast, but I'm going to look because I want to see these government men, And like Steve said, the pallor of their skin was a gray color, almost a greenish gray. It looked like somebody that, I don't know, like they've been eating a lot of broccoli. He
what you're saying is our government agents need to eat more vegetables.
Maybe they eat the veggies. But it appeared to be kind of Asian looking. Asian people are beautiful. They have beautiful skin. But this guy, he wasn't, he didn't look Caucasian. He wasn't African American. He didn't appear to be Indian descent. And the only thing I could think of was more on the Asian side, but his skin was gray. And I nodded at him when he went into the store, and he didn't even act like he was breathing. I thought, is he a robot? Just standing there. So I asked the woman inside, I said, what's that man doing out there? And she said, I called the police, but she said, they won't do anything because he's not bothering anybody. And she said, he's been out there all that time.
Do you remember how tall they were?
Yeah, not a whole lot taller than me. Back then I was 5'4". I would say 5'6", 5'7". He wasn't a whole lot taller than me, but then he had a hat on. But without his hat, he wouldn't have been a whole lot taller than me. And when I came out, I looked down the street, and there was another one leaning on a lamppost. And I'm like, I'm going home. So,
and Linda, back then you didn't actually think of them as, in quotes, men in black. When was it? You read John Keel's book when it came out. Is that right?
That's right.
When you put it together.
That's right. My dad said that he kept up on it. He knew a lot of people in his work, and he kept up on what all was going on. So he didn't want us down there. Of course, every weekend, that's where we went. A bunch of us would go in cars and go down to the TNT area and drive around. But that's the only time I ever saw those guys. And they stuck out like a sore thumb because in a rural town like Point Pleasant and Pomeroy and Middleport and the surrounding areas, nobody stood around on the street at night in a suit with sunglasses on. When I came out, I walked out with some other women because I thought, I'm scared. So I remember how I felt driving home. All the way home, it was dark, and I was afraid all the way home that, that they were going to follow me, that they knew what I had seen or somehow knew. They just had an air about them that it was mysterious. So I get home, and a couple days go by, and I think it's the evening of the 14th. We had a dance at school, and I stayed over to help decorate for Christmas. We put a tree and different things. We had a snow queen, and our band was supposed to come from Huntington area, which is down below Point Pleasant. Well, they were supposed to be there at 5 so they could get everything set up. Well, 5 came and went, and there was no cell phones. And finally, somebody came in and they said, I hate to tell you guys this, the Silver Bridge has collapsed. oh, it's, we're like, yeah, right. And they're like, no, it really did. And, it's horrible. So the only thing we could think of was, our band that's going to play for our dance. They had to come from Point Pleasant. They would go across that bridge and come up Penmore because it was closer that way. So it was, they were almost an hour late, I think, getting there. Finally, they said they were like 3 or 4 cars back from going into the bridge, and they saw all this, these lights and all this stuff that happened. They were running late, or they'd have been on that bridge. So, the night before it happened, the night of the third, the night of the 14th, I had a dream that there were all these cars in the river, and people were screaming, and packages were floating everywhere, and there was all these police and people standing along the river, and people crying. And I woke up with a start, and I told my mother, and she said, "Oh, Linda, you have dreams like that. Don't worry." But I didn't know. Mary Hire had that dream, and I didn't know until I saw the Mothman prophecies. Other people that saw Mothman, or that was associated with everything down in there at that time, had that dream of the bridge collapsing. I just didn't know what it was. Well, 2017, when I moved out here, I wanted to learn more. I had PTSD so bad. I graduated when I was 17, and I didn't go to work until the next year. But I got married when I was 20, and then I got divorced, and I moved out here. And I wanted to find out. I wanted some help. So I got a computer, and I got a hold of the Round Town UFO Society in Circleville. And they had me come up and to tell my story of everything that happened to me. And it was therapeutic. I had therapy for all that I had gone through. But I think that helped me more than anything. I continued to go to it, and to the Round Town UFO Society. And finally, they asked me if I could be regressed. I'm throwing things at him to try to get him to quit snoring.
I actually had to come back, and I was checking to make sure none of us were sleeping.
With a story like this, I would throw something at you. I would figure it out. I'd break my laptop doing it.
But anyway,
I got that pizza, Linda. I'll share it with you.
Oh, okay. You got some beer too, I hope. But anyway, I was regressed, and by a lady that was also she was a licensed therapist, and I made an appointment to be regressed, and I went over there and I'm sorry. That's okay.
I just want to be sure Linda's not being abducted.
Sometimes I wonder. Now they throw me back. Oh Lord, let's see. Oh my God. Anyway, I was kind of apprehensive to be regressed, but at the same time, I wanted to know what happened. I wanted to know about that lost time. Because
was it one session or was it several sessions over time?
He wanted to do more than one, but I was in there for probably at least an hour. She said there's more to uncover. She said I've done a few of these, and there's more to uncover. And I said, right now I don't think I can handle anymore, because I was going through a hard time in my personal life, and I had PTSD, and I just wanted to know what happened. I could go back and she would do more, I'm sure. But at the time, after I found out what had happened, it was enlightening, but it was frightening. Anyway, she put me under, and she said, she said, "Do you want to remember everything?" And I said, "Yes, I want to know it all." And so it's on the Roundtown UFO Society.com, and I think it's on the one in Facebook too, and it's under Linda's story. But anyway, she put me under, and she told me to start out where where I felt comfortable. So it was just like watching a movie. I knew exactly what I had on that day. I could tell her I had what I had on and what he had on and what it looked like. And going across the bridge, it was just like I was there. I thought, I won't be able to be hypnotized. But I remembered everything down to the minute details. I still do. And what happened was when we saw the big UFO the first time, and it went from behind the trees and it came up to the road and it stopped, and it came to us. And as it came to us and came above us, I looked up and my boyfriend jumped off the car. And when he jumped off the car, the quilt slipped. And I can remember burning my leg a little bit because we hadn't been up there very long. The engine was hot in that 56 Chevy, and it burnt the back of my leg when I slipped off. And when I slipped off onto the ground, I slipped off onto a pair of feet. And
wow.
2 large feet. And I looked up, and 2 big legs, and all I could see was the arms, the body, and the legs and the feet of that creature. And it was like I was, at that time, like I was mesmerized. I can't say I actually was hypnotized because I was aware of it. And I still was hollering for my boyfriend and trying to scream, and I couldn't. And that thing picked me up under the arms. I didn't weigh very much. I didn't even weigh 100 pounds, I don't think. And it took me right over to the car. And somehow it got the car door open. And I remember my boyfriend was sitting in there, and he was looking straight ahead, just sort of staring. And the thing pulled him out, and he stood up, and it put me in, and I slid across that bench seat of that 56 Chevy, and my boyfriend was put in beside me, and the door slammed shut. And that's when I came to myself and remembered that creature jumping up in the air, putting its wings back, and flying up into the trees. So from then on, my psychic abilities have skyrocketed. I seem to attract any kind of animals out in nature when I'm out. I have a rapport with just about all animals. But I also found out when I took to the woods out here, I grew up in the woods, and I have Native American ancestry, and I'm drawn to the woods. And I would go for miles back in these woods, and I still do it by myself. I started noticing these tree structures and footprints and things just out of place. Things started appearing on my porch, like jaws of deer jaws, circular things of moss. And one time I was sitting out on the porch at night talking on the phone. It was raining, and something directly across from my house, across the little road that goes in front of my house, up on a hill, threw a big stone down into the road, and it bang. And I got up and went out, and I still have that rock. And then I started hearing the vocalizations, and I still hear those every other night or so. There's something out there. Owls that don't, tin owls, coyotes that end up sounding like a growl, banging on the house, banging on the trees. Like I said, footprints. And the latest has been, I took the dog out at 10 o'clock one night, and I walked up the road, and it was dark, but there was no leaves on the trees. And the light behind the trees, I saw the silhouette of a big creature walk from right to left and then down over the hill. I went up the next day and found the ground was disturbed and there was muddy prints. And then the closest I've come to one, several times I've come close to them, but one of them was out by the pine tree at the corner of my deck. And I walked the dog out and it went whoop. And this was about 11 o'clock at night. And I thought, well, I can do two things. I can walk around there and see it, or I can go into the house. So I just stood there a minute. The dog ran back to the house, and I walked out to the edge of the pine tree, and I went whoop, and it whooped back, and then it ran into the woods, down over the hill into the dark. There's like 800 acres behind me of just woods. One left a skull in the tree. I went back to get it, and there ensued a fight between two of them. I could hear them arguing and doing that chatter, samurai chatter, that sounds like, it sounded like wild pigs. And I just took the skull and walked back to the house later. And so that's my life out here. I love it.
So if I'm understanding that correctly, you have experienced Mothman, UFOs, and Sasquatches are just fighting outside of your domicile.
Right.
That's incredible.
Spirits. I hear spirits. They occasionally I'll hear a voice. I'll see.
And a Bigfoot lives in the couch.
Yeah, and a Bigfoot that's going to bed that lives to my son Chris.
I saw a marsupial once.
Did you?
Is that the famous samurai sword wielding Chris?
Yeah, that's him. That's him.
I didn't know. I didn't know when we first started talking earlier, but I very recently listened to your episode of The Lost Frequency.
Why?
Hey now.
There ain't nobody gonna mess with me. With him, he's my bouncer. No, but, I've got a little doggy, and she and I take to the woods every chance we can. Of course, lately we haven't been out there because of the hunters. But,
right, the most dangerous of all people.
Isn't that the truth?
I have a question about the Men in Black.
Yes.
I have been trying to get people who have experienced Men in Black on the show pretty much since day one. I haven't been able to find anybody. And then here you are, this day, you just happened to come on. And you said that you were kind of skeeved by them. And I'm curious if you felt maybe more frightened by them than you did the experience with the UFO and Mothman, or if I read that wrong.
No, I think it stemmed from my age and my dad telling me, stay away from down there because of the government man. I was thinking more about getting into trouble, with my parents for going down there. Well, they knew that I went down there, but, they're like, trouble always found me. And I was afraid. I can remember there was just an aura about them. There was something not quite right. I saw a gray alien when I was 5, and I was looking out the front window of my bedroom. I couldn't sleep, and I was watching the boats and the trains go by, and the boats on the river, and I saw this little person walking under the street light, and I don't know, it was probably midnight or 1 in the morning, and I watched it, and all I could think of was it was a robot. I didn't know anything about aliens when I was that little, and all my life, and I still am afraid of robots. If I see a toy robot, I'll turn and go the other way. You know how some people are afraid of spiders and snakes? They reminded me of robots, and I think that's why I had such a fear. Now, I was intrigued with the creature itself when I saw it because I wanted to see it. I never dreamed that I would, and there it was. And the way it flew was like it jumped. Like I said, like Superman, it just put its wings behind its back, and it didn't flap its wings. It didn't make a noise. It just whoosh, and it was up into the trees. So yeah, the Men in Black, they were so different. Like I said, I didn't even see him blink. Of course, like I said, they had glasses on, but I didn't see him move. He just stood there. He was standing there the same way when I came out, and I was in there about 20 minutes in the store. And when I came out, he was standing the very same spot, very same way, looking straight ahead. And I think it reminded me of a robot, so that's why I was so afraid.
Hey, real quick, we got Rye on here from Lost
Rye
Frequency.
from the Lost Frequency is joining us.
Linda, how you doing?
We got a party going on right now.
How you doing,
That's what we
Rye?
do at Sasquatchers.
Hey, everybody, I'm doing great. And Linda, great to see you. We haven't talked for a while. I know.
Oh, how are you? Are you in Mexico?
I'm still in Mexico. Yes.
Oh, jealous.
I set up. I set up in our kitchen area, so it might be a little bit echoey. So please don't mind the sound. But great to see you all. Great to see you, Linda. And hi, Steve. I don't think we met, but I'm Rye from the Lost Frequency. And boy, Andrew and JC, good to see you guys.
Yeah, hey, thanks for jumping on.
Man.
We were just talking about the Men in Black experience that she had after witnessing the Mothman.
Yeah, I was listening to that. I was just getting some things done here around the house, and Linda, I don't think we dived in too deep when we talked about that about the Men in Black. But you were saying that his skin was gray, like an ashen color.
Yes, yeah. He was standing in the Christmas lights. It was the lights were beautiful down there. I can remember, and he was standing there, just one leg up against the side of the building, and just kind of like, can't remember. I think he had his arms crossed, but he had on a black suit, black pants, black shoes, black hat, and black glasses. But you could see the side of his face, when I walked past, and I was telling them I was so afraid of robots, and that's what he reminded me of. And I think of anything in the world that if somebody wanted to scare me to death, it would be with a robot.
Well, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But because John Keel did see a lot of people that were probably government men. He'd call, they had close cropped hair, skinny ties, and no personalities. So there was a presence there. But it's interesting that Linda saw what we think of as sort of classic Men in Black, not just the clothing, but the pallor of the skin and the sort of an Asian countenance. And that's kind of, every once in a while you hear a story like that, and it's kind of jarring because you tend to think, well, a lot of these are, there's a lot of, as there's a lot of strange people that are attracted to this realm. And so every once in a while, somebody a little bit odd, probably there we go, right there, shows up, and that a myth builds up around them, and it probably isn't much more than anything. But what Linda experienced, and what Jenny Randles wrote about some experiences, Nick Redfern and John Keel. There is some thread there. There's something going on that is just totally bizarre.
I did want to ask you, Steve, since you are kind of the resident Mothman expert that we had invited on, if there was any other kind of Men in Black specific stories that tie into this at all.
Well,
because
Jeff Wansley, who co-founded the Mothman Festival and is the curator of the Mothman Museum, he's got displays, and there's like 5 documentaries going on at the same time, all kinds of newspaper articles. There's a display, several of them, of the Men in Black, mannequins dressed up with the fedora, the sunglasses, and so forth. And even if you're standing out there at the Mothman statue, you look up to the second story. It's really jarring, because I will draw people's attention to it. You'll see this guy staring at you in the window. Fortunately, he's just a mannequin, as far as we know. But it's really cool at night because the light is on behind him. But one time, Jeff's mother was in there, and she's looking at the display of the Men in Black, and she said, "Well, what is that?" And so Jeff told her the kind of the myth and the lore and the history of the Men in Black. And she said, "Well, we used to see them back in the 60s. And Jeff is going, "Mom, you're just telling me this now? How long have I been doing this?" And he said, "Well, where did you see them?" And she said, "Outside of Mary Hyer's office."
Yeah.
Now, the opening of the Mothman Prophecies isn't a straight narrative. It jumps around a bit. And it starts out by the bridge has already collapsed, and Mary Hyer's in his office, and she is visited by these just odd characters that aren't dressed for the weather. They're fascinated by a ballpoint pen. Now, I don't know if these guys were just had some serious issues, but some of them would suggest that, well, what would you do if somebody said you shouldn't be publishing these articles on UFOs anymore? And she said, Mary Hyre was fearless. She said, "I'd tell them to go to hell."
Yeah.
But there was Jenny Randles has a case, not in Point Pleasant, but in England. A woman saw a strange light. I can't remember if she reported it or not, but a couple, apparently government men, came to the door, and her parents couldn't understand why they just let them in without any question. And one of them started pestering her with questions, and they weren't particularly enlightening questions, but she was very upset. So Jenny Randles got the idea later on, well, let's put her under hypnosis to see if we can glean anything else from this. And it turned out that the one man was firing questions at her, and intermittently, the other one was firing questions at her telepathically. And this is what was reported under hypnosis. Now, I can't even explain this, and neither set of questions was particularly revealing. So, yes, there were, and Keel would talk to people that he would miss these strange characters by 15 minutes. And one time he chased I think this was on Long Island, because there was a lot of stuff going on around there where he was from. He was a journalist from New York City. And he chased one car down to a road with a dead end, and it was gone. So, I don't know what to make of this. Some of the stuff, I hate to use the word supernatural, but it just is, it hits the high strangeness peg. So, and I don't know, there seems to be a government presence, and there's even, Nick Redfern uncovered some things that might suggest that, the way the government would do all kinds of weird programs, subterfuge and so forth, that some of the Men in Black situations may have been set up by the government, people just acting a little bit odd to try and test the limits of people's belief, and to see if anything would stick and become actual lore. There's some evidence to suggest that might be true. So it's a mess, to try to decipher what is objectively real and what is, something that's more in the realm of folklore.
That's super interesting. So my history with the Mothman is also JC's history. We grew up in the town that the Mothman Prophecies was filmed.
Katanning.
Yeah, we're from the Katanning area, and they came in and they completely rearranged Market Street and turned Katanning into Point Pleasant, and they filmed, and our entire town was involved. Everyone that you knew was in the movie in some form. And then production finished, and then they went on their way, and just Katanning continued to look like that. Honestly, to this day, anytime I drive past, all of the changes that they made just were permanent changes. So the movie, of course, was huge for us, and the Katanning theater, which they used to have, it was one of the first things to disappear out of that area. It was, it was like a premiere that you would see in New York or something. It was crazy how involved everybody in that town was. So the film is what kind of started one of like I guess how I want to say this. It's one of my interests in cryptozoology and whatnot was basically started by this film, and I always wanted to get the book, and I just never got around to doing it. So a lot of the stuff that you guys are saying, I'm actually, despite the fact I watched the movie, like this is the first time that I'm hearing it. And you're from Michigan, right, Steve?
Right.
So I'm curious, what drew you to Mothman?
Well, when I'd heard about flying saucers as a kid, and there was even a show called You Asked for It, where you could write in, I guess, and somebody apparently wrote in and asked about flying saucers. I didn't even see this episode, but my buddy Bill, he was all excited because he was talking about flying saucers going over this town. And I'm not sure what footage they showed. I think it was it might have been the Utah footage, and there was another state where there were like maybe a dozen like white dots. This is in the daytime in loose formation. There's a couple famous probably 16 millimeter films. And of course, the skeptics said, well, they're just birds with light reflecting off it. Anyway, that really fueled our playtime, man. We were being abducted by aliens before it was fashionable. And then the big one, March 1966, there was a wave of UFO sightings in Michigan and the Midwest. And those are the sightings that became known as the swamp gas sightings, because Dr. J. Allen Hynek was dispatched from Project Blue Book. He was still tied to the Air Force. They still wanted him to straddle the fence, and kind of downplay these sightings. He actually asked them, he said, do you want me to go down to Michigan because all the stuff's going on? He said, no, nobody said anything. Don't worry about it. And then Senator Gerald Ford, who later became president, he was incensed that credible people, police officers and so forth, were seeing these things and seeing landings and so forth. And, why aren't you doing anything? So the next day they dispatched J. Allen Hynek. I was there. I was in junior high at the time. And man, this is cool, having aliens landing in your backyard, even though you don't have a driver's license and you can't play UFO investigator, So I even remember the live news conference where he suggested that some of the sightings in Hillsdale might be the result of swamp gas, which shouldn't make any sense in that time of year anyway. But he was again tied to the Air Force, and of course that's all the press needed. The mystery of the flying saucers was solved. Now the postscript to that is I got to see him 10 years later in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where some of these sightings took place at the MUFON Symposium in 1976, and he had left the Blue Book by then. He had started the Center for UFO Studies. And the name of his talk was Swamp Gas Plus 10 and Counting. So, he became one of the good guys. But in the meantime, we eventually had a UFO club in high school. The following November in 66, November 15th, was the sighting where the Scarberries and the Mallets were chased out of, as Linda mentioned, the TNT area. And the old North Power Plant was still standing there. The TNT area was a place where they made explosives during World War II. And if you look at the old black and white photographs, you can see what an incredible complex it was. And they tore most of that down after the war. There are still some remnants there. And the North Power Plant was demolished in the 90s. So that's that particular sighting where they saw this thing by the North Power Plant on the road first, and then it kind of shuffled off to the power plant. And they noticed the red glowing eyes. It chased them into town. And that particular sighting, and they went to the police department, they separated them, and you can see their handwritten testimony in the Mothman Museum, one of the many things that's there. But that particular sighting hit the wire services all over the world. And that's why, as a kid in junior high, I read about it in Michigan. And I thought, how cool is that, man? A winged humanoid chasing couples down a lonely country road in West Virginia. So, and then after that, we started our UFO club. Flying saucer was so passé. So we were the Aerial Phenomena Investigations and Research Center. Okay. There were 4 of us, and then actually that particular organization, if you want to call it that, ended up in a couple of books as places to write to find out about UFOs. And we were nobody, we were just nobody. But we were the Aerial Phenomena Research and Investigation Center. But if you sound that out, and please don't, this is a family show, it's not very complimentary. So you weren't dealing with chimps here. So we switched the I and the R around, and we were in business. So that's really, I've been following the Mothman ever since. I've been coming down. Well, I came down in 1977 after I read the book in 75. And I highly recommend anything by John Keel. Mm-hmm. The book that really turned my head before the Mothman prophecies was Operation Trojan Horse. And that's where Keel starts to pull all these things together. And I came kicking and screaming because I was very happy with the idea of ET and so forth. And Keel kind of suggested that these things might be more of a natural condition of the planet. So I came down in 77, saw the old North Power Plant, Linda, when it was still standing.
Yeah, something on it.
There was a guy that I pulled up in my VW, right? And I was in my coveralls. And I'm walking out there with my Minolta camera, big investigator. And this guy with a hard hat it meets me halfway, and he says, "What are you doing out here?" And I wanted to be cool. I didn't want to say the Mothman. I wanted to say the bird, because that's what the locals called it, right?
We called it. Mm-hmm.
And this has been 10 years. And I said, well, I'd heard the stories about the bird, and I was, and he looks at me and rolls his eyes, and he says, "Yeah, I remember." But he was cool. He just wanted to make sure he let me in the power plant. He wanted to make sure I didn't kill myself, because a lot of people were getting hurt there. So that was, and then the next time I came down to Point Pleasant was 2006 for my first Mothman festival. I was a happy-go-lucky guy buying everything. I would get the fever, man. Anything with Mothman stamped on it, a T-shirt, a book, a souvenir, I had to have it. And but now over time, I became absorbed. I became working in behind the scenes, and I have spoken there, been MC. I helped set up in the TNT area for the phenomenal TNT hayride. Listen, I won't belabor this, but you've got to, if you go to the festival, you've got to get there early Saturday morning, buy your ticket, $5. That's the only thing that costs money there to go on the TNT hayride. We take people in the dead of night in the dreaded TNT area where the Mothman was seen. Guaranteed.
I just got to say it. Is it a blast?
Well, yeah, Engel did blow up about 10 years ago, but we won't have that happen again.
I thought the bad jokes were Tom's gimmick, right?
I know. I gotta play both parts right now because Tom's not here, so I gotta throw in those terrible jokes.
So that newspaper article that hit the wire services, I guess, determined my destiny.
Don't you think the book, though, is what happened to me? Don't you think the book is more true to life?
An orb. Yes, yes. The book is fascinating, and the thing is that it was written about 8 years after the events. Keel was kind of bored with it, and his publisher said, "Okay, it's time to write a book on the Mothman." And he couldn't interest anybody at the time, at the time it happened. And so he got out his briefcase and pieced together, his research, his articles, and came up with the Mothman prophecies. And then those faceless editors cut out half of it. And he told his biographer, Brent Rains, he said, if I had written everything that happened that year, I could have easily filled 6 volumes. So as it was, they cut out half of it. Fortunately, about 2/3 of it does survive in the follow-up book called The Eighth Tower. So it is, Linda, have you read Strange Creatures from Time and Space?
No, I haven't.
It's also called The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings.
No, I'll have to get that.
Okay, I almost recommend people read that one first because it kind of eases you into it. That's where he first talks about window areas and trying to understand why these things could sort of show up, scare the hell out of people, and then sort of evaporate. And that's kind of a stepping stone to Trojan Horse, because Trojan Horse really hits you in the face. It's just it is so different. When it came out, it is so different from the way people were thinking. And Keel got a lot of bad press. A lot of people did not like the message, so they went after the messenger. And then later on, when if you read those two, you're ready for the Mothman prophecies. But you can read them in any kind of order. But yeah, the Mothman prophecies is fascinating. It's one of my favorite books.
Yeah, I liked it a whole lot better than the film.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think they had the Mothman enough in the film, or the different events and different things. I understand the plot of it, but I still think that they could have made it a little more true to life, I think.
Right. Although Richard Hatem was the guy that wrote the screenplay, and when his Brent Rains said, I forget who the lady was. It was his literary agent was talking to John Keel when he got the script, and he was actually just about giddy because prior to that, people had handed him scripts where they were just trying to turn Mothman into a monster. But he felt that Richard Hatem finally captured, even though they updated it and they changed a lot of things, told their own story, he felt that they had finally captured some of the basic ideas. So he was very happy with it. And I got a chance to meet Richard Hatem. Now, he didn't know that. And I told him, I said, you've got to read Brent Rains' books because John Keel praised your screenplay over anything else he had written. So that was pretty cool.
Was the Ingrid Cole plot of that film accurate, or was that something that they had thrown in to make the movie a little more digestible? Well,
the Ingrid Cole thing is just mind-numbingly bizarre. It seems like some of the original, and you chime in here anytime you want, Linda. I seem like the original experience of Woodrow Derenberger may have been valid. In the film, they kind of, Linda, I think they kind of, for kind of a shorthand, Ingrid Cole seemed to merge into the Mothman when it was a very separate thing.
My ex-husband was Woodrow Derenberger's cousin.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
Yeah. Of course, Woodrow's passed away now, but all those synchronicities, it's crazy. And where Woodrow Derenberger saw Ingrid Cole was, as a crow flies, about 3 miles from where I live now.
Route 77, right?
Yeah.
But
mineral wells.
It's just that later on, some of his stories seem to be embellished. He wrote a self-published book called Visitors from Lanulos, and it kind of just went off the rails. But the thing is, before Derenberger came out, somebody had contacted Mary Hyre, and Mary Hyre got a hold of John Keel, and this guy was not Derenberger. He was coming down the same route, he and another guy, and the same kind of elongated craft is supposed to have landed, and they had a kind of didn't call himself Indrid Cold, but they had kind of one of these incredibly mundane conversations for being supposedly somebody from another planet. And so it was driving him nuts. He started drinking. So he said, I just got to tell somebody. So he gives them his story, and they were going to go forward with it. And then at the last minute, he decided, you know what, we're not going to talk about this. We don't want to give our names out. So Keel decided, what's he going to do with it? It's just a totally blind item. The guy says to Keel on the phone, I think, he says, well, that scientist fella said we should just forget about it. And Keel said, what scientist fella? And he says, hell if I know, but he seemed to know what he was talking about. And Keel said, well, how did he find out about your experience? And he said, I don't know, because he hadn't told anybody else. So somebody sort of in quotes, the Men in Black idea is more of a generic term. I don't know who this guy was, but so Keel squashed it. And then I think it was maybe the next day or 2 days later, Woodrow Derenberger comes out with his story of a virtually identical situation. And then a few months later, across the river in Gallipolis, Ohio, a woman that John Keel calls Mrs. Bryant. She's living on a farm there, and she's one of these situations where she's got sort of a 3-ring circus of the paranormal. She's got cattle mutilations on her property, haunting type phenomena in her house. And her son is seeing these large, she calls them like large boxcar like craft or whatever, flying low over the farm. And she's talking to Keel, and she said she was a nurse. She came out of work late one night, empty parking lot. One of these elongated craft comes down. A couple strange men, I think in coveralls, come out, sort of sounding like Indrid Cold types, but they did not give their name. Another bizarre, pointless conversation. She's paralyzed. She can't move. And then they go away, and she goes about her business, kind of freaked out. And then she says to Keel, she said, did that man, meaning Derenberger, ever see that guy again? And Keel said, well, he says he did. And she said, well, I saw them. She saw them, it was either the next day or the day after, in downtown Gallipolis in street clothes. And she said, one of them kind of nodded at her like, oh yeah, we just landed in our craft from Alpha Centauri and we had a little conversation. So, the Indrid Cold thing is just, it's mind numbing. And I don't know, there's other people that claim to have met Indrid Cold. I know a guy, I'm not going to mention his name. He claims Indrid Cold murdered his father. And I'm thinking, all I can think of is Darth Vader, But...
as far as the movie goes, when I was obviously much younger when that movie came out. Indrid Cold was what really struck a chord with me as kind of the outlier to the whole thing, and kind of what I felt was, maybe horrifying is too descriptive of a word, but that's kind of what gave me chills, was that character more so than anything else that was kind of presented, just like the awkwardness and the weirdness and the mystery behind it.
And what about the creepy phone call? That was really well done, don't you think, with Richard Gere?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, some of that was actually, there were other, in quotes, supposed entities. A lot of that, some of that dialogue came from another entity, not Indrid Cold, but a man named Mr. Apple, Apol. And a lot of this came through, can't remember the woman's name right now, Jay Perro. And she is supposed to have had a lot of experiences. And that gets into the prophecies part of the Mothman prophecies, because Keel was in contact with many individuals that were that firmly believed that they were in contact with other intelligences. Some of this seemed to be channeling, I think, Linda. Others claimed that they were having one-on-one contacts, but and they were getting, and Keel called them silent contactees, because they had absolutely no desire to be famous or to get their name out there. But they believed they would have quests. Sometimes they were undergoing, like one had to find this some kind of a magic crucifix in Brooklyn. I don't think there's any magic crucifixes in Brooklyn. That's just me. But but they would get prophecies sometimes, and many of them would come true. So they were kind of like hooked in. And then at one point they would become sort of abandoned, where they weren't able to contact this entity anymore, or they were giving. There was I think a University of Michigan professor whose name I can't remember, and it was connected with Uri Geller and this other group that believed they were in contact with several entities. There's a couple of books on it, and he was getting prophecies that were coming true. And then the big one, the world's going to end. Get all your people together on the hill. The saucer's going to come down and save you at the last minute when the world ends. The world did not end, but maybe his tenure did, because he's there looking like a fool. But many times Keel was talking to these people that would eventually, the prophecies weren't consistent. And then, see, this was all coalescing toward December 15th. And of course, December 15th, 1967 is when the Silver Bridge collapsed. But they were getting there were some of these prophecies suggesting that there was going to be a disaster on the Ohio River. Keel became convinced a factory was going to blow up. But he told Mary Hyre, don't tell anybody, because if it did, they're going to come to him and put him in jail, and because as the perpetrator. And Linda was right. Mary Hyre, and also Mrs. Thomas, who saw the Mothman toward the end of that year in the TNT area. It wasn't flying, and Linda will love this. It was moving very quickly, she said, like a robot, just moving across the. And but she also had those kind of dreams of packages on the water, but they weren't putting it together. So, and then these prophecies started to coalesce. There was something was going to happen on December 15th, and then it was going to be an EM effect, whatever the heck that meant. But it was going to be something was going to happen when President Johnson lit the Christmas tree on the White House lawn, and there was going to be, what was it, 3 days of darkness and just disasters and so forth. So, and Keel by this time, there's a chapter in the Mothman Prophecies that says paranoiacs are made, not born. And he said he was completely spooked by this time. And he told that same thing to Art Bell when he was promoting the movie back in 2002 on Coast to Coast. So he's holed up in his New York apartment. He's got jugs of water there, and he's ready, And then President Johnson lights the Christmas tree, and nothing happens. Then a few moments later, a blurb comes over the TV that a bridge collapsed between Point Pleasant and Ohio. And Keel was furious. It was like these prophecies were leading you to a point, but what good is a harbinger? What good is a prophecy if the trickster is involved? If it diverts you to something where you can't prevent the disaster? So that was the prophecies part is it's a lot of the book and a lot of what happened. And Linda, there's a couple other books that have been published, The Big Breakthrough and The Big Blackout, and it's notes from the johnkeel.com website, headed by Doug Skinner. He's got all kinds of lost stuff by Keel, and there was a time when Keel was buying into this. A lot of these things apparently were being channeled. They didn't seem to be one-on-one encounters with entities, as far as I could tell. But he does say in the Eighth Tower, he says he was embarrassed how he would sit out there in the woods. He went out there with Jay Perro one time, and he put her under hypnosis, and she started. He was asking her questions, and then all of a sudden, this Mr. Apple takes over, and starts butting in, and he wants to know things about the Kennedy assassination and Marilyn Monroe. I mean, it's just crazy the stuff that was going on. No wonder Keel was going nuts.
So you touched on something that I wanted to get into when you had mentioned that he was upset about, the prophecies coming to fruition, but without the ability to prevent anything. So I guess the question that I have to follow that up with is, what's your opinion on that subject as far as Mothman being a harbinger or a warning? Was it something that, like, was he truly trying to warn and prevent of that disaster, or was it something nefarious? Was he involved in some way with it?
Well, people have all kinds of different ideas. There's some that believe that he caused it. There are others that believe he was a harbinger, and there are others like me that think it was just something that happened at the same time and isn't a direct connection. My trouble with harbingers, again, is like, hey, don't go around chasing cars and scaring the hell out of people if you're here to warn about the bridge. Tell us, hey, the bridge is dangerous. We need something more direct than that. I might also add here the Mothman. Remember Linda said this thing took off, put its wings behind it, and didn't flap. Well, that was characteristic many times of this thing taking off. Connie Carpenter, one of the first witnesses, was driving by the Mason County golf course, and she saw this thing standing there, piercing red glowing eyes, freaking her out, puts its wings behind it, takes off straight like a helicopter. And the next day, it was almost the next day, when John Keel had come down from New York, and he was at the I'm trying to remember the name of the McDaniel's house, and they invited several people that were witnesses to the Mothman, and that's where he met the Scarberries and the Mallets and Mary Hyre and so forth. And she had a case of conjunctivitis, eye burn. Now that's something that shows up in people that have close encounters with UFOs or strange lights in the sky. Keel found that people that experienced both cryptids and UFOs sometimes suffered the same physical ailments like conjunctivitis, muscle ache, thirst, and so forth, suggesting that some of these things may have a common origin. But the point I'm trying to get to is that this thing didn't behave like a physical flesh and blood creature. Some have suggested that a 10-foot wingspan wouldn't lift a 6 to 7 foot tall humanoid. A lot of people that saw this had an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena when they got home. Did you ever have anything like that, Linda, after your experience?
I thought back about it, and I had like arthritis. I was only 16, but I had a lot of aches and pains in my arms and in my legs. Okay.
And some people even saw it manifest in their bedroom. The Greys, they were missionaries. And when this thing started, they hadn't, it had just started. They hadn't seen any of the newspapers. They were scheduled to leave the next day to go to some far off country as missionaries. This thing manifested, 6, 7 foot tall, red glowing eyes, wings, bat-like wings, in their bedroom. They looked at, in the context they looked at it was something demonic. And so they left the next day. Several years later, they come back, they look at the old newspapers and they think, my God, this is what we saw in our bedroom. I talked to another young lady that said she had the same experience. And then, Linda is one of the few I know of that had missing time. But there was another official, a guy who was a banker, and he's unnamed, but he's mentioned in the Mothman prophecies. He heard something out on his front lawn. He goes out there, he sees this thing, the Mothman, standing there, and then he goes into a trance for 10 or 20 minutes. That doesn't remember anything. He comes out of it, and then it takes off. So whatever this was, somebody asked me one time, what is this? What was the Mothman? And out of my mouth came, well, he must have been an elemental. And I'm glad they didn't ask me what an elemental was, because I don't think I could have answered it.
I think it is whatever aliens are. I think it was associated with them, and I seem to think that so is Sasquatch. I think they're all interrelated. I think they're all interdimensional beings of some kind, because that ship that I saw come through the clouds, that's just what it did. It just like the clouds opened up and it came through, and that thing was with it. And but it picked me up. It had a hold of me, and in order to do that, it would have to, unless it had some kind of special powers, which it did, but it's just stuff that we just don't understand. And I don't know whether I ever will.
Well, Keel thought some of these things were, he called them transmogrifications of energy. He thought they were temporarily physical. And that they, he even talked about the reflective factor, paranormal mimicry. When you mentioned the connection between Bigfoot and UFOs, Stan Gordon, who wrote the book Silent Invasion, covers this bizarre Bigfoot reports in conjunction with strange lights and what seemed to be some kind of craft in Pennsylvania in 73, 74, southwestern Pennsylvania. So it goes back to Operation Trojan Horse, John Keel. These things, there does seem to be patterns, things that pull these things together. And, it's just, we have this desire to know and try and understand, but it's sort of like, I call it the Red Queen effect. Remember the Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland?
Yeah.
She tells her, Alice, if you're going to get anywhere, you're going to run faster and faster. And Alice runs faster and faster, and the trees are staying still. That's what I feel like we do sometimes. We're trying to understand, and we think we're getting somewhere, but the trees are moving in the same, not moving.
We are actually having Stan on next month. I can't remember which day it is, but Stan's going to be joining our show. And he is a wealth of knowledge for the area on all of those topics. I can't wait in particular to talk to him about Kecksburg, because like Mothman, there's the Kecksburg Festival that is just growing and growing and growing in popularity. But I'm going to pose a question. I'm sure I'm not the first person who's asked this question, but do you think that what this stuff was actually, occurring would have possibly been, government, perhaps even testing alien technology that they have gotten their hands on? Could this Mothman actually have been almost like a mech suit of some kind?
There are some people that believe that. I guess I tend not to think that. And the thing is that there are these other high strangeness areas all over the globe, and I'm not sure that they would all have the government behind them. And also, I mean, you can go back in time, and there's been other situations where you had strange objects in the sky that were ahead of our technology and cryptids on the ground. In fact, remember the stories of the majestic airships from like 1897 and other time periods? Well, there was a series of them seen in Ohio between mid-April and mid-May, 1897. And they were seeing at least one of these making kind of a circuit around Ohio, the different towns. You can see them going clockwise and even lapsing over into Sistersville, West Virginia. And on the ground, they're seeing these large black panthers in Chillicothe and other places. And one of these things is really odd looking. It's got like a overlarge head, short legs. It's attacking dogs. They can't shoot it. They can't trap it. And it just is elusive. And also in Adams County, home of the Serpent Mound, they're seeing what they're calling a wild man, something we would probably call a Bigfoot these days. So you get these weird cryptids on the ground. And then another case, more modern day, Lee Hample, who has a farm very close to Bray Road, Elkhorn, home of the, not the only place Dogman shows up, but the area where Linda Godfrey, who we lost a couple of years ago, unfortunately, she started with the Beast of Bray Road and started chronicling these bizarre cases. Well, he has he has a farm. He was had degrees in mathematics and chemistry. He taught mathematics for decades. So he retires and he's making hay on his farm, just having a good time. And he's been there over 10 years now. But when he started there, some of the locals said, there's a werewolf that lives in those woods back there. And he's looking at him like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm a scientist. And then some of the other locals told him that what they had seen. And then he saw it one night and also had missing time. He set up these trap cameras. He's got thousands of pictures. He'll have people over as a special guests where for 2 hours he'll show you some of these photographs. And there's some kind of like bizarre technology going on in the sky. Classic flying saucers, zipping around trees. You can tell by the timestamp that takes no time at all. Also he's had several roadkill deer that he's pulled onto his property. He sets up a camera, and from the timestamp, you can see there's the carcass. A little bit later, a mist kind of rolls in. A little bit later, the carcass is gone. No drag marks, no footprints.
Wow.
And this has happened maybe a dozen times. That's just the tip of the iceberg of what's going on in this property. Again, you've got these creatures that act like animals. They eat roadkill, they eat bait, but there's some kind of technology that tends to cloak them. The cameras don't work when they take the bait in front of the camera. So, I don't know what to make. That's another pattern. And I don't think, I don't think the government could be behind all this, but it wouldn't surprise me if there has been some manipulation. I mean, they're up to all kinds of no good sometimes, So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they do things to kind of test the limits of our belief, see how they can manipulate us.
Rye, I actually just listened to an episode of your show today where you guys were discussing cloaking with I believe it was Sasquatch. What are your thoughts on the cloaking phenomenon?
Well, and this might have been the one where I was talking about when I was mentioning, like, some people think it's all this woo and so far fetched, but if you look into our own animal kingdom, specifically octopuses and squid, they're able to and cuttlefish, they're able to cloak naturally. They're able to adjust and to blend right in with their surroundings. So how is this far fetched? I don't think it's far fetched at all. I think it's actually quite feasible. A lot of creatures, and I believe that these are interdimensional beings. And Steve, you had said that someone was saying that these beings are partially they have to come into the physical realm, but they're not fully physical, and that's something that I believe as well. Like I believe they're kind of like they're interdimensional, like Linda, you were saying as well. They're interdimensional beings, and I actually feel that the longer they stay within our physical, in our earth realm, whatever you want to call it specifically, the longer, like, the more physical they become. But yeah, I believe that cloaking is 100% real. Now we can get into this context of government involvement, kind of how Steve was saying. I believe that there are genetically modified creatures that maybe the government has gotten their hands on and have actually taken out of the genus. It's kind of like, we're going to make our own, especially with the Dogman. I believe there's a bunch of different avenues that the Dogman follows up. But yeah, back to the cloaking, I think it's completely feasible and possible. And again, it's kind of like, I always believe that Hollywood gives us soft disclosure. They tell us up front what's going on. The Predator movie, the Predator, they show all this cloaking, and everybody who's described Bigfoot as being cloaked describes it exactly like that. Well, I wonder why.
Well, they talk about the shimmer effect, or the quicksilver curtain, yeah. And the Native Americans, and the Sally Shepherd Wolford wrote a book called Valley of the Skookum. And she's the mother of Autumn Williams, who's a well-known Bigfoot researcher. And when Autumn was between 3 and 6, they were living in Ording, Washington. and they had all kinds of experiences with Bigfoot. Some of them looked very solid, very flesh and blood. Others seemed to be translucent. They also had a classic UFO activity around, and orange orbs chasing cars, and even Men in Black showed up at one point knocking on doors. So there's maybe you guys heard the story of it's at the end of the Missing 411 book by David Paulides called Hunters, and it was where Jan Maccabee, her husband is well known, Bruce Maccabee, a photographic expert, used to be in the Navy. She was in a deer blind in Lima, Ohio, and she started to see this. Everything got quiet, like the Oz effect, and she started to see this sort of a shimmer or like a blur in the trees, maybe 15 feet in front of her, and something was jumping around, moving around in the trees. She took a photograph, and she waited until the Oz effect left. She was really kind of freaked out, and it was a while before she left. But they checked the photograph afterwards, and you see this kind of blur, and off to the side, you can see these black hairs, suggesting that there was some kind of a beast there. At the same time, she didn't see it, but her nephew texted her, and he was doing band practice at the high school about a half mile away. And they saw some kind of a large orb or craft or whatever come over the field. So all this was happening at the same time. But it was that kind of cloaking, and there was even an incident on the Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know if you guys remember. There was this is even before, I think it might have even before Bigelow took over originally. But the Shermans, the father and son, that some of this had gotten out in the newspaper. There was some guy that came to the ranch and said he begged him that he could go there. He wanted to meditate. So they kind of looked at each other and said, okay, have at it. So he goes out to the field, starts to meditate, and something comes out of the woods like it's angry. And it has this sort of shimmer effect. And later on, when these guys saw, like you said, the movie Predator, they thought that's the effect that this thing had. And I don't know what this guy encountered, but it freaked him out, and he couldn't wait to get off the Skinwalker Ranch and go meditate elsewhere.
Do you think that? Oh, go ahead, Rye. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that it's extremely interesting, yeah, and it like I said, I'm just reiterating again that when people think that it's all woo and crazy, it's like, well, take a look at the animal species that we have, literally, where you can see it in our animal kingdom, and is it so far fetched that a creature living on land has the same abilities?
I suspect, though, even though some of this is bizarre and paranormal and perhaps extra dimensional, it still operates under certain immutable laws. We just don't understand them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that any of this stuff may stem from the Montauk Project, or Montauk, however you pronounce it?
That I don't know. That's not an area that I could really talk about, I don't think.
What about you, Rye? I think I've heard you talk about it before.
I don't know enough information about Montauk. Montauk is fascinating, but I don't know enough. I know it also ties in, like there are rumors that it ties in with the Philadelphia experiment, time travel, experimenting on other things as well. Yeah, that's all I really know. It's fascinating. I want to know more. So unfortunately, I don't have any more comment than that.
Yeah.
All right. That might have to be the topic for the next live here on Sasquatches. Then we can
you'll have to get another expert.
I got to do some research. Well, the Montauk Project is based on, like Stranger Things is based on the Montauk Project as well, about opening portals to other worlds. Right. Like this is, and it's not loosely based. I'm going to say that, there is some strong, I don't want to say truths because it's all like kind of classified, so it's all like hearsay, I guess. But that is what it is based on. So Stranger Things is based on the Montauk as well. So they are opening up portals to other dimensions, and possibly that's what I believe. Also, what in Switzerland, what is that called again? The Big Hadron Collider. I think that is also possibly ripping holes in space and time, but that's something else completely different.
I kind of suspect that the Philadelphia experiment was a hoax perpetrated by a guy named Carl Allen, who called himself Carlos Allende, and he's the one that annotated the book by M.K. Jessup, The Case for the UFO, where it looks like 3 different people are making comments in the margins and suggesting that they might be aliens or something like that. And there actually is some audio where he's talking to Gray Barker, admitting that he's the one that wrote in the margins for the on the book, The Case for the UFO by Jessup. And there's a lot of other things that make me suspect that whole thing was perpetrated by him. And the idea that some hoaxes just never die. So I could be wrong about that, but that's my feeling about the Philadelphia experiment.
That's another one that I have to research a little better before I can really comment too much on it. I remember the movies from back in the day, but beyond that, I don't know a whole lot. Or, the occasional Art Bell episode.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a question that kind of stems back to Linda, and she had said that she and her family had, psychic abilities. And I was curious if there were any other experiencers of Mothman that also kind of come from that background. Could it have possibly been drawn to those abilities?
One thing that I always thought that might be a connection is Chief Cornstalk is my 7th great-grandfather, and he's the one that was murdered in Point Pleasant, and they said that he had put a curse on Point Pleasant in the area for 200 years. And I talked to several other people that saw Mothman, and they said the same thing, that they were related to him. And I was wondering, like a harbinger, if there could be some kind of connection there with the Native American ancestry.
Well, I think other people have also their psychic abilities increased.
Mm-hmm.
Had the experience with the Mothman.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, a lot of them had like a poltergeist breakout and strange phone calls, calls with nobody on the other end, or mechanical voices or whatever. So there does seem to be, and even sometimes the people that have a abduction experience or whatever seem to have an increase in psychic ability.
Mm-hmm.
I have the same psychic ability as a common brick. So,
wow.
I don't.
So I have a question that kind of goes in line to say one for you, Linda, here. So do you feel that this was just an incident of happenstance, like you were in just kind of that place at that time? Or do you think that, there was some greater movement going on because, you've now been haunted your entire life by other experiences that could be related to this?
Steve knows this. In my family history is Sylvia Brown, and she was a noted psychic, and she passed away about 3 years ago. My great-grandmother was related to her. Their name was Shoemaker, and her name was Shoemaker. She's in my genealogy when I did my genealogy. I have psychic abilities on both sides of my family. My one grandmother is from Southside, West Virginia, which is right down below Point Pleasant, and she had incidences when she was young. That's my dad's mother, and her name was Hambrick, and she saw the Black Panthers all the time. She told me about that, and the hairy man. And then on my mother's side is it's her dad is through the Shoemakers, and my mom had abilities, but she just didn't talk too much about it until I got older. And but I think that I think it runs in the family. I believe in predestination. I think that we all have, when we come here to Earth, we have our whole life is already planned out for us. I think we have free will to go in different directions. But I think that some people are healers and prophets, and I think that, it's kind of like if I'm a Christian person, so I think it's kind of like a power of discernment. I mean, I can come up to somebody in the grocery store and tell them their life story. I'm drawn to people, and if I'm somewhere special, like around water, the ocean, or something like that, seems like my powers of discernment is increased. But my daughter's that way. My sister is, but she doesn't delve into it. It frightens her. But
Water
I think
is sorry, Linda. I was gonna
it's
say
like
water is
the conduit. Mm-hmm.
yeah, water is an amplifier, 100%. So definitely when you
Yeah.
hear it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a question about, and I don't know if the guys had touched on this yet. When you were talking about the UFO, can you describe it in detail? This UFO that you saw,
When we first saw it, when we were sitting on the car, it was probably 50 yards from me, and it was so big, I thought it was farther away, but it wasn't. It was just like a full moon or larger, and it was, when it first came through the clouds, it was smaller, but then all of a sudden it just burst through, and it was orangish red. I'm real bad about trying to say how big it was. I'm trying to think. 50 feet maybe in circumference around. But as it traveled slow behind the trees, and when it got up to the road and stopped, it sort of turned like almost on its side. And when it came toward us, I could notice it was almost like flat on the bottom, and there was a like row of lights, like in a cross or a T underneath. Blue lights and white lights. They didn't flash, but when it was over top of us, it was like the bottom of it was flat, and it was domed, and it turned almost a whitish yellow. Didn't hurt your eyes to look at it. But the thing was so big, when I looked out, I couldn't see the stars or the sky. It was that big. And then when it went down over the hill, it appeared to be a ball again as it was traveling away from us.
But there was a time when it seemed to be a physical defined shape, even metallic, maybe?
Yes. Okay. It was something physical because it was so close. These ceilings in my house here, what are they, Chris? 18 feet maybe?
Yeah.
In the tallest part. It was only about 20 feet above the car. I mean, it was giant, and it was above the car where it looked like it was going to come down and just land on the car. And that gigantic thing, and the light around it, it lit up all around the car and all around the ground. And that's how, when it started to move away, I could see the creature. That's how I saw it so well, because it was to the left of the car and flew up over the hood of the car to my right and up into the trees. But it was a physical object. It wasn't like a hologram. People have asked me, well, could it have been a hologram or something projected? No, it was a physical object.
And it wasn't just a ball of light.
No.
And when it came through the clouds, what was that like? Did you see it behind the clouds, or was this all of a sudden this light appeared and it came through the clouds? I'm wondering if it was if it was traversing, like opening some gateway, some portal, and coming through at that point, and then just breaking through these clouds.
That's what I think it was. It looked like, well, you look out straight from eye level, and it was just up a little bit, and then but we thought it was a star, but it just it would be bright and then it would go dim, and then it would get brighter and then go dim, and then it got real big and then it went back in, and then about the fourth time it came through, bam. And that's what I thought was some kind of explosion. I didn't feel any kind of a repercussion from it or anything, but I can remember it lighting up the back of the trees and the sky. The clouds it was almost like the Northern Lights, except, it was pink and red and orange and yellow, and it was like an explosion. And then that sort of went into itself, and there was that object. And it was like, my God,
Now,
and it just sat there.
When it was over top of you, Linda, did you feel, was there any, like, I don't want to say emotional fear, but was there any other emotions that were going through you? And was there any others of your senses that you, like, maybe smelt something different, or perhaps like your skin was crawling or your hair was standing on edge? Was there anything else like that?
I was sitting on the car when it got that close, and there was a warmth to it. And it was more of like if you would take a lamp and hold it up above you. You feel a little bit of heat, but then there's a lot of light. But yet it didn't hurt your eyes to look at it. But the whole area was lit. The ground was lit. But it seemed to be just right under the object. It wasn't the whole field or anything that was lit up. It was just right under the object, right over the car, right over us. And I remember turning in, and he was gone, and I slipped and fell onto the ground. And I remember hitting the ground and landed on something. I kind of wiggled and looked, and that thing was there that close. I was on its feet.
I know. After these incidents, you had said that you and your boyfriend both kind of felt a little ill, and that it felt like something had like downloaded or uploaded into your brain. Mm-hmm. And if I recall correctly, maybe like he had like kind of like stomach pain or something. Maybe I'm misremembering that.
No, he was well. He wouldn't talk about it. He didn't feel real well, but he didn't talk about it. I think that I felt more euphoric than anything because I was in awe of it. I didn't really think about it hurting me so much as I was so curious as to what it was. I think that was to do with personality, and I'm not saying I felt a kinship with it, but, I didn't feel like it was there to hurt me. Now, afterwards, he had a lot of problems afterwards, withdrawn, and he had personality changes. He went through quite a bit, but and then he ended up with heart problems and all kinds of things. But
well, Linda Scarberry said she saw it several times afterwards, and she felt like it was lost. She had a lot of compassion for it. She didn't seem to fear it afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've seen a lot of things. I used to sit on my back porch with my granddaughter, and we would sit out there, and I'd say, "Let's call them in," and we'd laugh, and we would sit out there and watch the skies, and we'd always see something. And that was before what is that called?
CE5.
Yes, the E5. That was before that was years ago. And I always saw something in the sky. I mean, I could go out there tonight and see something. Just about every time I go out, I feel like there's something out there around me.
Just make sure you don't call it down over my house. I want to have a good night's sleep.
Oh, I think we all have that ability. I think that we are all psychic beings. where there's more to our life than what we even can.
Whenever I try that, they're just laughing. They say, "Oh yeah," they think he's gonna call us down. Yeah, we're gonna go to Linda's house.
You'll have an experience, but it's amazing, that how it has left me. But I'm glad that I can help people with the things that I know. But I've done a lot of praying about it, and it has affected me that way. But I've come to terms with it now.
I had my own UFO experience in 2017, and it's nothing at all like what we've heard from Linda. It's actually pretty basic, but the one thing that I did take away from it, and I still hold on to this day, is just how at peace and at euphoric the experience was for me.
Yeah.
And there are days that I think back to it, and I just think I'm the luckiest person in the world for having experienced it, and almost maybe even occasionally some depression because it hasn't happened again. And I think that's just a really unique feeling and experience to have. And I think most people kind of lean that way. I think at least from the conversations that I've had with experiencers, the fear and unease kind of is from the unknown, more or less. And then once you kind of accept what you've seen, you kind of become a lot more compassionate about the experience.
I think the older we get too, I think in my 40s it really took off, and my abilities. I kept a lot of that to myself, but I didn't know what to do with it. But I think that in your 40s and in your 50s, and the older you get, the more settled you become to it, and it just becomes a part of your life. It's just who you are.
Right. And so, Steve, real quick, I was curious, as far as Mothman experiencers go, do you have any knowledge about people who were more along the lines of Linda's boyfriend at the time, who then started to have, like almost personal issues, being withdrawn, hitting into the health issues?
I've talked to some of the original witnesses, and I've seen some long form interviews with Marcella Bennett, for example. I never met her, but she's the one that she went out with her brother to, it was a different Walmsley family, but this house was in the TNT area. And they were going to go out there because, her brother didn't think there was anything to this. It was a big joke. So they're going to go tap on the windows and try and scare their friends. So they went out there, and it turns out the parents weren't home, just the kids. So they're walking back to the car. And it's interesting because there haven't been many, but there have been a couple of other sightings of the Mothman or whatever in conjunction with a strange light or maybe some kind of craft or whatever. For the most part, he was just seen sort of flying solo. But her brother was trying to get her attention. There was some light up there in the sky, and she didn't want to look. She didn't want to deal with it. And that's when this thing rose up off the ground. And the Mothman, I mean, she saw the eyes, the wings. She collapsed. Actually, she fell temporarily on her infant child. It took her a while to recover, to get up. They both ran into the house, and this thing actually was walking back and forth on the porch. So if this thing is a transmogrification of energy, this sucker was very physical at that moment and scaring the hell out of them. Of course, they called the police. By the time the police got there, they were gone. It was gone. So, but afterwards, she talked about how she wouldn't drive at night. I mean, this really had a major effect on her. And let's see, of course, and some of the other ones, Linda Scarberry, Merle Partridge, who didn't actually see the creature, but his dog disappeared. strange lights were out by his farm.
Mhm.
People were ridiculed mercilessly, and that took a toll on a lot of people. I'm trying to think. Faye DeWitt, I don't know that. I think she's always been kind of psychic as well. So
She has. I've talked to her in length.
right,
Mhm.
and I think Keel felt that a certain percentage of the population were naturally psychic, or could he used the super spectrum as kind of a literary device. They could see further and experience more than others. He also found out that people that would have an experience. He said he had this great catchphrase. He said, "Ask the contactee what they had for breakfast," and what he meant was, ask the experiencer what he or she, find out all about their life, because he found out that people that had these experiences were having psychic experiences or bizarre experiences all their lives very
Yeah.
quickly. I talked to a lady in New Hampshire. She got a hold of me. She and her husband saw this giant. Well, they were standing under the front porch. It's early morning. It's dark. There's an airport nearby. They're very familiar with the lights. This thing passes overhead. Well, actually, all of a sudden, they're not standing next to each other. It's a little bit lighter out. They look up, and there's this giant black triangle passing overhead, touching the tops of the trees. And then, like so many people do, it didn't register at that point. They turned around and went back to bed. Later on, she realized she was missing about a half hour. So I started.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
How are you? I'm in a
Beyond wonderful.
hammock. I'm in a hammock with no t-shirt because I'm fucking tired.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, this is my co-host Tom.
Yes. Tom's a bit of a card.
Tom's been working hard.
I love speaking about myself in the third person. So, hey, so what are we talking about? Witches, warlocks, poo-poo? What are we talking about?
Well, let me finish my thought here. I was talking to this lady that had a missing time experience. So this is even before she did regain these memories. But I asked her a series of John Keel style questions. To make a long story short, it turned out they were experiencing haunting phenomena. Both children were seeing orbs inside and outside the house. She saw shadow people. And then I asked her, I said, this is going to sound a little weird, because I know people that had these experiences had also sometimes seen some kind of a creature. And I said, have you ever seen anything, a creature or an animal you couldn't identify, like a Bigfoot or whatever? And she said, well, no. But then she said, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law saw something near the property. They saw this thing twice. And it was something like a Black Panther, but standing on two legs.
Yeah.
So the point there is, if I had been frozen in the 1960s, just thinking about E.T. and nothing else, I never would have found out these questions. But John Keel and others like Rosemary Ellen Guiley kind of laid that path out for us.
Mm-hmm. My grandmother, like I said, that lived down below Point Pleasant, she saw those Black Panthers all the time. And she had strong psychic abilities, but they would come up on the porch. That's what that reminded me of when you said that. But they would just come up on the porch and walk across the porch.
I was just talking to Paul Sinclair, who is a researcher in Yorkshire, northern and eastern Yorkshire. He's written several books called Truth Proof, The Truth That Leaves No Proof. And he has chronicled many Black Panthers in that area. And it's one of those things that seems to be a constant in some of these high strangeness areas.
This is actually the first time that I've heard about the Black Panther stuff at all. I'm super curious about this. I'm going to have to research it after we end the episode. Is there a certain
we had actually
direction?
a guest on we had a guest on that had seen the Black Panther as well. And for the life of me, I can't remember the location, but yeah, it's a large black beast, as it was called. But yeah,
I saw the movie too.
Mm-hmm. They've been seen in this area. There's a man that works with Chris that he not only has UFO experiences, but he's seen Black Panthers a lot, and he lives not too far from me. Marietta. Mm-hmm.
Married someone about a month ago. I'm a lady pick up a flight.
Yeah. Yeah, they're around here. I know some people that live Washington County. That's the same place out in the country. They came home from hunting one night on a 4-wheeler, a man and his son, and there were 2 standing in their driveway. They weren't cougars, they were black panthers.
I think that is kind of like a shapeshifter scenario, or is this kind of like the cat version of a dog man, or just
I haven't heard any shape-shifting stories with the Black Panthers, but they seem to sometimes congregate where other things are going on, other lights in the sky and so forth. So yeah, I don't know. But they're very elusive. Nobody seems to be able to shoot them or trap them. Mm-hmm. And the establishment swears that no, there are no Black Panthers in this area.
I know. They're everywhere.
I mean, they say that about even mountain lions here in the central PA, and we absolutely have I've seen one with my own 2 eyes. I've seen a mountain lion here, and the state and game commission, where we haven't had one in 60, 70 years or whatever it is, but even that exists as far as denying and accountability from the people who are telling us how wrong we are.
Hey, Andrew, you're not questioning the establishment now, are you?
No, I would never do that.
Yeah, we had actually. I'm just remembering we had our one guest, Seth. He talked about this black. They actually called it the Wampus Beast or the Wampus Cat. And he talked about that one, and so it was interesting. He said it was a large beast, bigger than a panther, from what I recall. But I don't remember the specifics of it or the location as well. Could have been in Virginia or in Florida. I can't remember.
I even remember a report. I can't give it the time exactly, but this is South Africa, and they're driving along the road, and they see some kind of a craft or light shoots over, and then right after that, a Black Panther runs out in front of the car. Now, or something like that. So it could be a total coincidence, but these things, what I find fascinating is these patterns that keep showing up, and they show up all over the world geographically in different time periods. And then, like you and I were talking about, the things we think of as separate, like UFOs, cryptids, poltergeist phenomena, turn out to have a lot of connections, a lot of patterns that run together. And that's, back in the old days, everything was seen very separately. Now, some people still do, and it's perfectly all right to specialize in certain areas. But I can't go back. I'm a dyed-to-the-wool-Keelian, I'm afraid. And there's no cure.
Yeah, the Wampus Beast. I think Seth was telling us. I think if I'm correct, I think he said it was in Ohio. Okay, and I remember I'm from Maryland, and they were telling us. I mean, this is like in the mid '90s. They were saying, "Yeah, there's no Black Panthers in the state," and then there was a picture that showed up on someone's in their backyard and everything. So I definitely believe they do exist. But as referring to the Wampus Beast and these weird, large predatory type felines, I don't know, man. There's a lot of things out there we just don't know yet, and I think more of it's going to come to light because they're trying to push this UAE stuff on us. I mean, what's next? You know what I mean? They're just trying to scare us, but we're all like too smart to it, I guess now. But it's going to be an interesting time. I think in the next 5 years we're going to find out a lot of interesting things. Not to get too conspiratorial because that's my bread and butter.
We'll have to do a just straight up conspiracy episode together one of these days because
that's going to be we'll
never get off. It'll be 16 hours long.
You're gonna have to hold on to your hat because I'm into that stuff, dude. I mean, man, let's get on that Earth.
Yeah, for sure. But you know what? We've been over 2 hours now, and that just kind of blew by. I think it's a good time to end it here. But before I do, I want everybody to, plug your stuff. If you have anything that you want people to check out. Steve, obviously you have your podcast and all of the stuff that you're involved with. Linda, I'm not so sure if you have anything that you like. Okay.
I have a book out on Amazon. It's called Beyond the Pale Moonlight, Mothman UFO Encounter.
Yeah, I saw that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I also have a couple other things. I am a correspondent, whatever the hell that means, on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files, also on the Paranormal UK Radio Network and many other platforms. It's kind of a free-for-all, a lot of fun. And I have a book I co-authored with Mark Randall. It's called Mothman High Strangeness. And Mark Randall is a great graphic artist, and it covers the year of the Garuda, the year of the Mothman. And that's he and I wrote the pieces for it. And actually, you might still find some copies of Tim Beckley put together a book called Weird Winged Wonders. And I have a chapter on there, huge surprise on the Mothman. So there you go.
Okay, for sure. Everybody listening, check that out. And then, of course, Rye and Tom, you guys have your very successful, very awesome podcast of your own, Lost Frequency.
Definitely put the emphasis on the word suck. No, we do all right, man.
Yeah, we got the Lost Frequency podcast. Tom and I have been doing that now for a bit. We do everything from crazy to strange to mysterious to conspiracy theories, and some crazy new theories. We have some really cool episodes coming up here in the new year that gonna rock your socks. That's all I can say.
Gonna knock your socks off, dude.
Definitely, Linda, we'd love to have you back. Linda, we definitely love to have you back again, just to review and go over everything again. That was
stop sniping our guests, right?
Well, hey!
Still has his sword.
Yeah, well, I've already had Linda on, so there you go.
Yeah, we're the nerds that got her last, actually.
Look out!
That was like the episode with Linda. I gotta be honest with you, it was very, very enthralling, very exciting, and I think at the end when your son came on and me and you were just laughing about him with his sword in front of the door.
He had that sword. He still has it.
Might be one of the funniest moments on our show, and you had me in tears.
He still has that sword, and it's right when you go in his bedroom, and I've walked in there before and fell over it.
Sounds dangerous.
Yeah.
Did you know? Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you guys for having us, Andrew and JC. Great meeting you, Steve. Good seeing you again, Linda. I'm going to check out because I got an early morning.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for joining. Thanks for popping on.
Later, buddy.
I'm a retired
See you
man
tomorrow.
of leisure, so I'm going to stay up and party.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Do you have any of that pizza left?
Oh yeah, I'll just heat it up in the microwave.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
No, you put it in
Linda.
a pan with a little bit of water. See you, Linda. Thanks.
See ya.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Linda.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, all.
Good night, Steve. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Not sure how to get out of here.
So it's okay. No, none of us do. We're all trapped. We're not trapped here with you. You're trapped here with us.
Oh, okay. Well, still, I'm in a time and a half now, right?
Yep.
Yeah. We'll put the check in the mail. Oh, okay, bye.
What's up, guys? Kid, I'm sorry, man. I fucking fell asleep. I knew it was going to be bad. I fucking humped concrete all day with like some Mexican fellas.
I saw the picture of you, yeah.
They kicked my ass. And they're like, what was the problem? I'm out there. And they're like, what's wrong, gringo? And I'm like, you motherfucker.